It employs directly 150,000 full-time people, and the empire it rules employs another 1 million. More than 1 out of every 100 people in the United States works in the HEW empire. As we have seen in this series, the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare is spending increasing amounts of our money each year on health. One effect is simply to raise the fees and prices for medical and hospital services without a corresponding improvement in the quality of medical care that we receive. It is controlling more and more of the food and drugs we buy, in the process discouraging the development and preventing the marketing of new drugs that could be saving tens of thousands of lives a year. In the field of education, the sums being spent are skyrocketing, yet by common consent, the quality of education is declining. More and more money is being spent and increasingly rigid controls imposed to promote racial integration, yet our society is becoming more fragmented. In the field of welfare, billions of dollars are being spent each year, yet at a time when the standard of life of the average American is higher than it has ever been in history, the number of people on welfare rolls is growing. Social Security, the budget is colossal, yet it is in deep financial trouble. The young complain, and with considerable justice, about the high taxes that they must pay, and those taxes are needed to finance the benefits that are going to the old. Yet the old complain, and also with justice, that it is difficult for them to maintain the standard of life that they were led to expect. A system that was enacted to make sure that the old never became objects of charity sees an increasing number of our older folk on the welfare rolls. By its own accounting, HEW in 1 year lost through fraud, abuse, and waste an amount of money that would have built well over 100,000 houses costing $50,000 apiece. Little wonder that those initials are increasingly coming to stand for how to encourage waste.
They found in some cities that upwards of 20 to 25% of all the people currently receiving welfare are either totally ineligible for welfare or are receiving more than they should be receiving. And it appears in looking into this that the main reason for this is not the welfare laws themselves, but the way they're administered. They're administered in a very lax and loose manner. One of the most famous cases was, frankly, it just happened last week. They arrested a woman in Southern California, where they referred to her as the welfare queen. And over the past 6 or 7 years, she had received $300,000 in welfare payments, which of course is on an after-tax basis, so if you put it on a before-tax basis, might be equivalent to over $1 million in before-tax income. And she and her husband were living in a nice $170,000 home and nice cars, and she used a very simple technique. She just used aliases, used false names, and signed up, and I forget countless different welfare agencies and departments, and drove around and collected her checks.
Something had to be done about this scandalous state of affairs. What better bureaucratic decision than to set up a special department crammed with computers and civil servants, all dedicated to tracking down waste, using taxpayers' money, of course, in the process. $27.5 million in the first year. As Adam Smith wrote over 200 years ago, in the economic market, people who intend to serve only their own private interests are led by an invisible hand to serve public interests that it was no part of their intention to promote. In the political market, there's an invisible hand operating as well, but unfortunately, it operates in the opposite direction. People who intend only to serve the public interest are led by an invisible hand to serve private interests that it was no part of their intention to promote. The reason is simple. As we have seen in case after case, the general interest is diffused among millions and millions of people. The special interest is concentrated. When reformers get a measure through, they go on to their next crusade, leaving no one behind to protect the public interest. But they do leave behind some money and some power. And the special interests that can benefit from that money and from that power are quick to gain it at the expense of most of the rest of us. By now, after 50 years of experience, it is clear that it doesn't really matter who lives in that house. Government will continue to grow so long as the rest of us believe that the way to solve our problems is to turn them over to government. Yet there are many people who want to solve their own problems, who want to use their own skills and energy and resources. We found such a person here in Southern California. John McComb, a fireman, was planning his retirement. He decided to fulfill his life's ambition. He'd build his own house with his own hands. He bought a site with a magnificent view, cleared the ground, and realized that he was the first man who ever cultivated this land. It made him feel good. He pulled a trailer onto the edge of his plot and moved in with his wife to live there while they worked on the house. He made his own adobe bricks. He planted avocado trees, learned about carpentry and plumbing. It was going well when one day a local official arrived with a warning. It was all right to build a house, he said, but it was against regulations to live in the trailer any longer. The McCombs thought that the rules were bureaucratic and foolish, and they resented them. They decided to leave the trailer exactly where it was and defy the authorities. Pat Brennan became something of a celebrity in 1978 because she was delivering mail in competition with the United States Post Office. With her husband, she set up business in a basement in Rochester, New York. Soon it was thriving. They charged less than the post office, and they guaranteed delivery the same day of parcels and letters in downtown Rochester. There is no doubt now that they were breaking the law as it stood. The post office took them to court. The case against them was simply that they should not be handling letters. The Brennans decided to fight, and local businessmen provided the financial backing.
I think there's going to be a quiet revolt, and perhaps we're the beginning of it. That you see people bucking the bureaucrats, where years ago you wouldn't dream of doing that because you'd be squelched. Now, with tax revolts and with what we're doing, people are deciding that their fates are their own and not up to somebody in Washington who has no interest in them whatsoever. So it's not a question of anarchy, but it's a question of people rethinking the power of the bureaucrats and rejecting it.
Very good.
The Brennan customers were clear about one thing. After all, the Brennan service was cheaper than the regular mail.
We're not sure that they have done anything illegal. And I'd like to know more about this, and I hope that this gets further into the courts than it has already. And someone will listen to their appeal. Because when we use the Brennans, we know for a fact that that same-day delivery is going to be happening day after day after day. Whereas with the other guy, you're not sure, and you're not sure what kind of shape it's going to get there in. So I am behind the Brennans 100%. And anything I can do to help them, I will.
Well, the question of freedom comes up in any kind of a business, whether you have the right to pursue it and the right to decide what you're going to do. There is also the question of the freedom of the consumers to utilize a service that they find is inexpensive and far superior. And according to the federal government and the body of laws called the Private Express Statutes, I don't have the freedom to start a business, and the consumer does not have the freedom to use it. Which seems very strange in a country like this, that the entire context of the country is based on freedom and free enterprise.
The post office won the case. It went all the way to the state Supreme Court, and the Brennans were closed down, put out of the business of delivering mail. What we've been looking at is a natural human reaction to the attempt by other people to control your life when you think it's none of their business. The first reaction is resentment. The second is to attempt to get around it. And finally, there comes a decline in respect for law in general. There's nothing specially American about this. It happens all over the world whenever some people try to control other people. For example, take a look at what's happening to the British. For most of the past century, Britain was known throughout the world for the respect which its citizens gave to the law, but no longer.
And I think it's perfectly fair to say that we have become, in the course of the last 10 or 15 years, a nation of fiddlers. How do they do it? They do it in a colossal variety of ways. Let's take it right at the lowest level. Take a small grocer in a country area, say Devon. Very small turnover. How does he make money? He finds out that by buying through regular wholesalers, he's always got to use invoices. But if he goes to the cash and carry and buys his goods from there, then the profit margin on those goods can be untaxed because the tax inspectors simply don't know he's had those goods. So that's the way he does it. Then if you take it at the top end, if you take a company director, well, there are all kinds of ways they can do it. They buy their food through the company. They have their holidays on the company. They put their wives as company directors even though they never visit the factory. They build their houses on the company by a very simple device of building a factory at the same time as a house. It goes absolutely right through the range, from the ordinary person doing ordinary working class person, doing quite menial jobs, right to the top end. Businessmen, senior politicians, members of the cabinet, members of the shadow cabinet, they all do it. I think almost everybody now feels that the tax system is basically unfair. And everybody who can tries to find a way around that tax system. Now, once that happens, and once there's a consensus that a tax system is unfair, the country, in effect, becomes a kind of conspiracy. And everybody helps each other to fiddle. You've no difficulty fiddling in this country because other people actually want to help you. Now, 15 years ago, that would have been quite different. People would have said, hey, you know, this is not quite as it should be. So that's the first reason, a very high level of taxation. But I think personally that there's another factor comes into it. And that is that over the years, we've had a huge growth in bureaucracy, government expenditure, cotton wool, if you like, to protect people from the slings and arrows of ordinary life, you know, health service, all kinds of benefits of one sort or another. And I think there's come into the consciousness of people almost a sort of new factor, a feeling that things don't quite have the value that they did, that money is not a thing of value. If you're short, you get it from some government body or other.
Criminal tax evasion in Britain